Have you ever witnessed a moment where all preconceived notions shattered in just a few minutes? A moment when the most underestimated person became the brightest star? At Horizon Middle School, the morning math class was nothing short of a nightmare for 7th graders. Today was no exception. Students sat quietly, avoiding the gaze of Ms. Anderson, the notoriously strict and unforgiving math teacher. In the midst of the tense atmosphere, a girl sat at the back of the classroom, silent and unnoticed. Emma, 12 years old, was known as the quiet student, never raising her hand, never standing out. To most, she was just another face in the crowd. But what no one knew was that inside Emma's notebook, beyond the usual math exercises, lay complex equations that few in the school could even comprehend. Ms. Anderson let out a sigh, her cold voice echoing through the room. This is basic knowledge, yet half the class still doesn't get it. Let's see if anyone here can actually solve this problem. She turned to the board and wrote out a long equation filled with variables and intricate calculations. The room fell silent. Students exchanged nervous glances, but no one dared to speak. Then, Ms. Anderson's eyes landed on Emma. Emma, solve this problem. All heads turned toward her. Emma's heart pounded. She had never wanted to be the center of attention. But today, she had no choice. The tension in the classroom thickened the moment Emma's name was called. All eyes locked onto her, some curious, some sympathetic, and others filled with quiet amusement. No one had ever seen Emma speak up in class, let alone attempt a problem that even the top students had silently surrendered to. Emma felt her chest tighten. It wasn't the math that scared her, it was the attention. For years, she had perfected the art of being invisible, ensuring that her name was never mentioned in any situation. But today, Ms. Anderson had shattered that protective shell. We don't have all day. Emma. The teacher's voice carried an unmistakable tone of doubt. A few chuckles rippled through the back of the classroom. One boy leaned over to whisper to his friend, his voice just loud enough to be heard. She actually thinks Emma can do it. What a joke. Emma's grip on her pen tightened. Her heartbeat quickened, but not out of fear. This was something else. Frustration, not at Ms. Anderson, not even at her classmates, but at herself. She had allowed this to happen. She had let them believe she was incapable. Taking a deep breath, Emma did something no one expected. Slowly, she stood up, pushing her chair back. The scraping sound echoed through the silent room. She walked to the front, her fingers brushing against the cool surface of the chalk. Ms. Anderson stood with arms crossed, skepticism written all over her face. The rest of the class waited, anticipating the inevitable awkward moment when Emma would falter, unsure of where to begin. But Emma wasn't what they thought she was. Her eyes locked onto the equation. Numbers and variables danced in her mind, arranging themselves into patterns that made perfect sense. To her classmates, this problem was an insurmountable challenge. To Emma, it was just a puzzle, one that, like all puzzles, had a solution. She picked up the chalk. No hesitation, no second guessing. And then, in a classroom that had fallen completely silent, Emma began to write. The soft scratching of chalk filled the utterly silent classroom. Every pair of eyes remained locked onto Emma as she carefully marked the first symbols on the board. At first, a few students still smirked, waiting for the inevitable mistake, expecting Ms. Anderson to cut her off with a sharp, condescending remark. But with each stroke of chalk, their smirks faded, because Emma was actually solving the problem. There was no hesitation, no nervous glances around the room seeking reassurance. Emma tackled the equation with an unshakable composure. Every transformation she wrote was precise, methodical, and undeniably correct. A ripple of murmurs spread through the class. Some students squinted at the board, trying to keep up with her logic. Others whispered to their neighbors, "Wait, this looks right. No way, does she actually know what she's doing?" Ms. Anderson, who had been standing with arms crossed, watching with her usual icy expression, now furrowed her brows. She took a step closer, her eyes fixed on each step of Emma's solution. But Emma didn't notice any of it. At this moment, the whispers, the stares, the weight of everyone's expectations, they all disappeared. All she saw was the problem in front of her and the path to its solution. She did what she had done countless times in the pages of her notebooks, only this time, she did it in front of everyone. As she reached the final step, Emma paused briefly, double-checking each calculation. Then, with quiet confidence, She wrote down the answer and circled it. Silence. No one spoke. No one even moved. Emma set the chalk down and turned to face the class. Ms. Anderson remained still, her gaze fixed on the board, her lips pressed together in thought. No one could tell what was going through her mind. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, as if the entire room was holding its breath. Then, after what felt like an eternity, Ms. Anderson gave a slight nod. But not in mockery, in acknowledgement. The classroom felt frozen in time. No more whispers, no more mocking glances. Every student sat in stunned silence, eyes locked onto the solution on the board, trying to process what had just happened. Emma still stood there, her fingers dusted with chalk, her breathing steady, though her chest rose and fell with unspoken emotion. Ms. Anderson said nothing at first. Instead, she stepped closer to the board, scanning each step, each symbol Emma had written. She raised a hand, tracing each calculation with her fingertip, her lips moving slightly as she mentally verified the answer. The room held its breath. Then, at last, she inhaled deeply and turned to face Emma. "How did you know how to solve this?" Her voice no longer carried its usual sharpness or skepticism. Instead, it held something else: surprise, curiosity, and, most importantly, respect. Emma lowered her gaze. No one had ever asked her about her abilities before. She had never imagined a moment where she would have to explain them. I like math," she said softly. "I study on my own at home." Her words landed like a slow detonating bomb in the classroom. A few students' jaws dropped. Others murmured among themselves. "What? She teaches herself? No way, that's insane." Ms. Anderson crossed her arms, her piercing gaze still fixed on Emma. Then, she turned to address the entire class, speaking slowly and deliberately. "Do you all realize what just happened? Emma just solved a problem that no one in this room was expected to solve." Silence. Emma felt her cheeks grow warm, not from embarrassment, but from something else entirely. Recognition. A single clap broke the quiet from the back of the room. At first, just one or two students joined in. Then, more. The applause grew louder, spreading throughout the class. Emma's eyes widened as she looked around. She had no idea how to react. She had never prepared for this moment she had never believed would come. Ms. Anderson didn't stop the applause. She simply stood there, watching Emma with an expression the girl had never seen from her before: admiration. The applause gradually faded, but the air in the classroom still buzzed with awe. Emma had never been the center of anything. Yet here she was, standing before the class, facing a teacher she had once believed was impossible to impress. Ms. Anderson continued to look at her, but her usual stern expression was absent. Instead, there was something else: recognition. She turned back to the board, studying the solution once more before speaking slowly. "This solution is absolutely correct." No one was more surprised by those words than Emma herself. Ms. Anderson was known for rarely giving praise, even to the best students. She demanded perfection. And now, she had just publicly admitted that Emma had accomplished something she hadn't expected. From the front row, a student hesitantly asked, "Is she even better than you, miss?" Laughter rippled through the class, not mocking, but full of admiration. Ms. Anderson didn't scowl, didn't dismiss the comment. Instead, she held Emma's gaze for a long moment before nodding slightly. "Emma, you just proved me wrong." Emma blinked, unsure if she had heard correctly. Ms. Anderson, the strictest, most demanding teacher in school, had just admitted she had misjudged her. "I assumed you were just an average student. Nothing extraordinary. I failed to see your true potential. And that was my mistake." Silence filled the room once more. A teacher admitting fault in front of students was rare. From someone like Ms. Anderson, it was nearly unheard of. Emma didn't know how to respond. She simply held onto the piece of chalk in her hand, feeling something unfamiliar rise in her chest: pride. A pride she had never allowed herself to feel before. Ms. Anderson exhaled and continued, her voice softer. "But what's more important is that you didn't let those assumptions define you. You have a rare talent. And I need to ask, why have you been hiding it?" Emma hesitated. She had never really considered that question before. But after a moment, she lowered her gaze and murmured, "I didn't think anyone would care." Her words hung in the silence like a revelation. A student this gifted had truly believed she wasn't worth noticing? Ms. Anderson studied Emma carefully. then slowly shook her head. You were wrong, Emma. A lot of people care. And from today forward, I will make sure you are never overlooked again. Ms. Anderson's words echoed in Emma's mind like a ringing bell. I will make sure you are never overlooked again. She had spent her entire childhood trying to be invisible, making sure no one paid attention to her. But now, for the first time, that no longer seemed to matter. The class was still watching her, but their gazes had shifted. No longer filled with doubt or idle curiosity, now there was respect. Emma could see it in the subtle nods, in the way a few students stole glances at the board, as if trying to comprehend the solution she had just written. Ms. Anderson stepped back to her desk, arms crossed, and spoke slowly. Emma, do you know that there are many math competitions for students like you? Competitions where your talent won't just be recognized, but nurtured, where you can truly challenge yourself. Emma's head snapped up, her eyes wide. She had never considered entering a competition. Math had always been something private to her, a world where she could disappear, a space that belonged only to her. But now, hearing those words, a thought flickered in her mind. What if I tried? And yet, almost immediately, another fear crept in. What if she stepped out of her comfort zone and failed? What if today was just a fluke? What if she wasn't as good as everyone suddenly seemed to think she was? Ms. Anderson seemed to sense her hesitation. She took a step closer, her voice uncharacteristically gentle. I know this might be intimidating, but the greatest people in the world aren't those who never fail. They're the ones who dare to try. And I believe you can do this. Emma swallowed hard. She glanced down at her hands, still dusted with white chalk. A part of her longed to retreat, to go back to her quiet corner, to continue solving problems in secret, unnoticed. But another part, stronger, unfamiliar, but undeniably real, was urging her forward. She took a deep breath and, after a pause, nodded slowly. I'll think about it. A faint smile crossed Ms. Anderson's lips. She didn't push, didn't demand an answer. She simply nodded back. All right, just remember, you don't have to hide your talent. There are so many doors open to those who are willing to step through. The shrill ring of the bell signaled the end of class, followed by the usual rustling of books and chatter. But today, no one rushed for the door. A few students cast lingering glances at Emma, not out of mockery, but admiration. Some even stepped closer, flashing small, knowing smiles before heading out. Emma slowly sank into her chair, her chest still heavy with everything that had just unfolded. But deep inside, she knew something had changed. Not just in how others saw her, but in how she saw herself. As Emma walked out of the classroom, she felt something different. For the first time, she was no longer just a shadow, blending into the background. She had stepped out of her comfort zone, and though it had been terrifying, it had also been incredible. During lunch, a few classmates approached her, not to tease, but to ask about her solution. Some simply said, "That was amazing, Emma." She had never imagined hearing words like that directed at her. That evening, as she sat at her desk, Emma opened her math notebook. But this time, she didn't just write equations for the sake of personal satisfaction. Her thoughts drifted further, to the competitions Ms. Anderson had mentioned, to the possibility of challenging herself in ways she had never dared to consider before. She realized something important. Talent wasn't meant to be hidden. It wasn't something to be kept in the shadows, but something to be nurtured and shared. Emma's story is a reminder that sometimes, we don't recognize our own worth until someone else sees it in us and helps us believe in ourselves. And more importantly, we should never be afraid to step into the light. Because who knows? The world might just be waiting to witness something extraordinary within you.